37 and call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Okay, good morning. I'm taking a roll call here. Do I have Alameda here?
Yes.
Okay. Tim Haynes. Bart? Do I have Bart on the phone? Okay, you're on mute. Biggs?
Yes, here.
Gridley?
Here.
Healdsburg?
Here.
Lodi?
Good morning.
Good morning. Lompoc? Looks like Lompoc is absent. Palo Alto?
Good morning.
Good morning. Is that Lena? Okay.
Yeah,
Plumas?
this is Lena Perkins.
Okay, thank you. Plumas?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, thank you. Port of Oakland? Port of Oakland is absent. Reading? I think you just may have joined. We'll come back to Roseville.
Here.
Santa Clara?
Status Jane and Basil Long.
Thank you. Shasta Lake? Okay, looks like Shasta Lake is absent. Truckee?
Stephen Ponsley here. I will have to leave at 11. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. And Ukiah?
Good morning.
Cindy Sowers, right? Thank you.
Correct.
And do I have Yulia on the phone?
Yes, apologies, I'm right.
No problem, thank you. And do I also have Reading on the phone?
Yeah, I just got on.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a quorum present, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, approval of the minutes of February 19th commission meeting. If there are no corrections, I'll entertain a motion and a second to approve.
Roseville seconds.
Okay, motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Okay, taking a roll call for the commission meeting minutes. Alameda?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Bart?
Yes.
Biggs?
Yes.
Gridley?
Yes.
Healdsburg?
Yes.
Lodi?
Yes.
Lompoc?
Yes.
Palo Alto?
Yes.
Port of Oakland is absent. Reading?
Yes.
Roseville?
Yes.
Santa Clara?
Yes.
Shasta Lake is absent. Truckee Donner?
Yes.
Ukiah?
Yes.
And Plumas?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Public forum. Any member of the public who desires to address the commission on any item considered by the commission at this meeting before or during the commission's consideration of that item shall so advise the chair and shall thereupon be given the opportunity to do so. Any member of the public who desires to address the commission on any item within the jurisdiction of the commission and not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Do we have any members of the public at any location or here? Hearing none. Moving on to reports and committee updates. General Manager's report.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Let me run through some things as you've all been dealing with. The temperatures have been relatively warm for the last month, and snowpack is melting fast. Obviously, California stores most of its water in snowpack, and so it's kind of challenging when we get such early heat and we're not seeing a lot of new storms coming in and our snow is melting relatively fast. We were fortunate that our reservoirs were really full coming into this winter, and they remain pretty full, but lots of water's going down the rivers because we don't have enough storage capacity out there. Conditions are somewhat changing from what we might have projected even in our budget, as Monty's going to talk about budget. But, you know, the belief was we had good reservoir levels and we had a fairly decent snowpack. having it melt so early is going to kind of change some of the conditions, because we'll see some of the water agencies hold back on allowing us to do some of the releases and maybe generate the power, as they're going to try to preserve some of the cold water pool, as well as save some of the water for potential drought conditions later on. That means we might burn more natural gas than we would have considered before, but plants are going to be ready for the summer. The other thing that we're hearing now and seeing more data on is we're expecting a very, very warm summer, um, potentially abnormally warm. And those conditions make it difficult, obviously, providing power. So we'll be monitoring natural gas prices. I think Tony's group's going to look at establishing a few more positions, hedge positions for natural gas. They're monitoring what's going on in the Middle East and how it could impact natural gas prices. So far, it's not having much impact because we just don't have as many export terminals to do LNG. All the export terminals that do exist in the US are probably fully utilized at the moment, but we'll be watching that one closely. This last month, we held the utility director retreat down in Lodi. I want to thank City of Lodi and Mikey Hothi and Jeff Berkheimer for hosting us. A very nice event down there, a good opportunity to get all the utility directors together and really discuss in detail some of the goals, the objectives for NCPA going forward in this next year. Talk a little bit more on how we might address affordability a little bit differently, as well as address some of the wildfire activities. So I thought it was a very good retreat. Some of us just returned from earlier this week from the California Municipal Utility Association annual conference in Monterey. I think they did a good job with a variety of speakers. I also will say they recognized me, which I really appreciated that opportunity to get up and say a few words from that. And also this last month, maybe David will talk a little bit more about this in his report, but we were able to host Congressman Mitsui at the Lodi Energy Center, take her and her staff around the facility, talk about hydrogen, talk about the project there. She indicated that she might be interested in trying to get some funding for that hydrogen project through an earmark and resurrect that. But she had a great interest in what's being proposed there and very, very supportive. So again, thank the City of Lodi also for helping coordinate some of that. Also wanted to share that next month for the commission meeting, it is being hosted by the City of Shasta Lake. Please, 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 if you haven't already confirmed to Carrie, you think you're going to go, let her know. We have a tour of the Shasta Dam as part of that. If you've never been there, it's a very, very interesting facility. Key component for some of the hydro resources we get out of the Central Valley Project. A lot of history there. Also probably some discussion on the raise of the Shasta Dam and how important that is, again, to have additional storage capacity in California. And lastly, we have one of our staff here at NCPA who has also been a professor at Sacramento State, has his doctorate, and he works under Tony's team, Mustafa. We have been working together with Mustafa to reestablish a potential summer professor hire. So this is something I used to do in LA, and several municipals would do this. We would work with some of our universities that we hire our engineers from, and we would provide summer project opportunities for some of the professors to bring them in, continue to refresh on what's going on in the utility industry, learn some of the latest, but work on a project with our team in order to have that better understanding about what our needs are going to be, and hopefully then be able to teach the future students and engineers better about what's going on and what are the needs of the utilities going forward. It's also been a good tool in the past to get some of the top student engineers for the summers, because we use the professors sometimes to give us the references as to their quality students. So we're working the details right now to bring in a professor for the summer on a specific project. It will probably be more of a project contract approach versus a summer hire. I've done summer hires in the past, not here, but at LA. But for this one, it looks like it might just be easier to do a summer project approach. But again, just trying to reestablish to ensure that we have this good pipeline of future employees for both NCPA and NCPA members. Last year, we had a very strong a group of student engineers and student workers for the summer. And again, we're trying to keep that up, just as many of the utilities are in need. So with that, I will stop because I'm guessing David will talk about the federal policy conference a little bit. Okay, so I don't need to do that. And I'll take any questions if anyone might have it.
Any questions online? Okay, thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
So, good morning. The executive committee met this morning. A quorum was established. And here's an update on the following executive committee meeting today regarding the general manager's recruitment process. The executive committee continues to work with Korn Ferry to advance the recruitment and has completed key evaluation steps in the process. At today's meeting, the committee continues its discussion and alignment on next steps, including preparation for the next phase of interviews. The executive committee will continue its work in the coming weeks and remains on track with the overall recruitment timeline. We appreciate the commission's continued support and will continue to provide additional updates as progresses. And the next meeting will be 4/23 at Shasta Lake. So please join us if you can. Thank you. After that, facilities.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have another efficient Facilities Committee update. The Facilities Committee did meet on March 4th to evaluate a number of items that are presented to you today for consideration. Based on the discussion at that meeting, the Facilities Committee staff did recommend approval of items number 15 through 19, which are listed under consent today, as well as they recommended approval of item number 20 that's listed under discussion. Pending any questions the commission may have, that concludes my report.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee has not met since the last commission meeting. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for May 5th. At that upcoming meeting, I plan to share with those members information about Senate Bill 827. It's a new law that was signed in 2025 that was effective in 2026. You may be aware of it. It builds upon the current ethics training that we all do, the AB 1234, and it's designed to include a fiscal component to ensure that local officials, pull up the PowerPoint. Sure, local officials and certain employees are adequately educated on financial responsibilities to their public office, and so here it is listed here. It is required for board members, your city clerk or city attorney, whoever sort of is responsible for your training, may already be aware of this. And again, I just want to share a little bit about it. It's really what they're trying to say is that local officials, and this is true, holds a fiduciary duty to the public as one of the many hats you wear. And then that requirement is to act as responsible stewards when it comes to managing local funds. And that's why certain employees are also in this category. And how they word this is the duty involves extensive and complex fiscal management responsibilities. And they call this out as saying such as tracking revenue streams. you've heard me talk about this when I've brought certain policies forward. We talk about cash flow, liquidity. It's all things that are extremely critical for a city or an agency to have defined items. It also talks about creating restrictions, which is that safety component that I've talked about in the past. And it's really to make sure that you're in compliance with the California Government Code 53601. And if you think about some of the duties that you do here, you probably do some of them at home as well. You approve policies such as NCPA's debt and investment policy. You also approve the delegation of those investment duties to NCPA's treasurer controller, as well as approving, which is in your packet today, it's in there, is the monthly treasurer's report. Those are duties. And you also, next month, are going to approve NCPA's budget, hopefully. And so it's all designed to ensure that the management of funds is carried out in the public's interest. And so this is just a reminder. Next slide. If you are a member of CSDA, they have frequent webinars. If you're a member, it's free. They have one coming up here June 17th from 1 to 3. It's online. So if you're not a member of CSDA, when I did this Google search, there are other associations offering this training for free. And then there are some law firms like common ones that we use, like Best, and is it Krieger, if I'm saying it right? They offer it as well, low fee, $75, I think their fee was. But if my point is we'll share this with the Finance Committee. If any of our commissioners need some assistance, checking the box on this training, just reach out to us. We're more than willing to help coordinate this if you need NCPA's help getting it done. So that pretty much concludes my report, and I'll take any questions you may have.
So Monty, being the NCPA is a member of CSDA, could any of our commissioners utilize our membership there for their training?
I'm not 100% sure. When I logged in, obviously it was free when I signed up. I would have to test that or ask, but it's something I need a little bit more time to evaluate.
Yeah, it seems that if they're representing us under our membership, it seems like we could use that membership for anybody that wants to go that way and do this online webinar.
If you register as NCPA, I believe you're right, that it would trigger the free membership. As Monty said, we'll put a couple calls in, and get a note out to everybody, clear the decks on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Legal?
Great.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question with regard to the finance report. Monty, you said that there hadn't been a finance committee meeting since the last commissioners meeting. Do you recall off the top of your head when the last finance committee meeting was?
It was February.
How frequently are the finance committee meetings?
They're quarterly for the most part. There is one extra one that's scheduled in October to review. It might be September to review the financials, but it's quarterly. So it's February, May, August, October, November is what's on the calendar. Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, now legal.
Okay, all right, so the legal committee did meet, we met on March 5th, and we talked about some of the items that we'll be talking about here today in closed session. We also talked about some efforts where we're evaluating corporate structures for different assets, and as that will be going through the legal committee and then coming up to you guys once we kind of vet some of those ideas going forward. The other thing we talked about was our successful efforts to not allow PG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, and Southern California Edison to charge the RTO adder, which is 50 basis points on top of their rates. This is worth, we actually got, this went to the Supreme Court. They denied cert, which means they decided not to take up the case, which allowed the lower court ruling to stand. The lower court ruling found that they are not eligible. The 3 IOUs in California are not eligible for the 50 basis point adder. So this is something we've been fighting for, at least a couple years now, if not longer, through FERC, up through the courts of appeal, and now at the Supreme Court. There's one more case pending, but we do expect them all to kind of come out in the same way. The savings, we spent about $30,000 on this specific effort, but we're saving. California ratepayers are saving about $100 million a year by not paying these charges. That's CAISO connected entities, and that translates to about $2.5 million for NCPA members per year that we're saving by not having to pay the additional 50 basis points to the 3 IOUs. So a significant victory. We talked about that in the legal committee. And that's my report for the legal committee. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
All righty.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
All right, legislative and regulatory.
Staff participated in the American Public Power Association annual legislative rally in Washington, D.C. at the end of February. We met with our congressional
No questions for Dave? Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Member announcements or meeting reports? Hearing none? Consent calendar. Yes, sir. Awesome, thank you. Any other comments? All right, we'll move on to consent calendars. All items on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be approved without discussion by a single roll call vote. Any commissioner or member of the public may remove any item from the consent calendar. If an item is removed, it will be discussed separately following the approval of the remainder of the consent calendar. Prior to the roll call vote to approve the consent calendar, the commissioners will be polled to determine if any member wishes to abstain from one or more items on the consent calendar. Does anybody want to pull any items from the consent calendar? If not, Carrie will do abstentions.
Okay, I'm just going to ask if you'd like to abstain from any items. Alameda?
No.
Bart?
No.
Biggs?
No.
Gridley?
No.
Healdsburg?
Nope.
Lodi?
None.
Okay. Lompoc?
None.
Palo Alto?
None.
Port of Oakland?
No.
Reading?
No.
Roseville?
None.
Santa Clara?
None.
Okay, Shasta Lake is absent. Truckee Donner?
None.
Ukiah?
None.
And Plumas?
None.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So with that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar.
Santa Clara moves to approval.
Oh, Gridley? Okay, Gridley.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Okay, thank you. Alameda?
Yes.
Bart?
Yep.
Biggs?
Yes.
Gridley?
Yes.
Healdsburg?
Yes.
Lodi?
Yes.
Lompoc?
Yes.
Palo Alto?
Yes.
Port of Oakland?
Yes.
Reading?
Yes.
Roseville?
Yes.
Santa Clara?
Yes.
Shasta Lake is absent. Truckee Donner?
Yes.
Ukiah?
Yes.
And Plumas?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 20, discussion action item, resolution 26-23. Tony?
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item's a little unique because it requires a unanimous vote by all 10 pool members. So based on our current accounting of attendance, it looks like we do have all 10 pool members here. So thank you very much for being available. So I'll go ahead and go through the presentation. A little bit of background as to amendment number 2 to contract 21 SNR 02661. All the members do receive energy from Western, the base resource product that serves a significant portion of your load. And back in 2021, NCPA, as well as all the NCPA pool members, executed what's known as the 2025 base resource agreement, or contract 21 SNR 02661. Via that mechanism, NCPA is a signatory but is not a load serving entity. So through a process of what's called assignment, the 10 NCPA pool members then assign their base resource interest to NCPA so we can actually schedule and manage that on behalf of the pool members. And that's all done through the contractual mechanism called the AAA agreement, which is a document that describes how we manage that, and that AAA agreement is what requires a unanimous approval of any instances where NCPA agrees to execute any amendments to that contract that might have a financial impact on you. Hence the purpose of this discussion today. If we can go to the next slide when you have a chance, please. So the subject is last year, Western entered into what's called a transmission exchange agreement with the California ISO and PG&E, where in essence, Western exchanged certain transmission rights with PG&E and the California ISO. And as a result of that negotiation, Western received 200 megawatts of transmission capacity that could be used to effectively bring base resource energy from the Western system into the California ISO to serve our loads. And as noted on the second bullet of this presentation, the details include the ability to import power at the Tracy substation and deliver that to what's commonly known as the PG&E default load aggregation point, or in essence, where all of your loads are served. And that's where we do take delivery of our Western-based resource. Last year, this commission did authorize NCPA to enter into amendment number 1 to the base resource contract, which we did sign. But that contract is set to terminate at the end of this calendar year. And so WAPA is now offering the continued use of this right going beyond the end of this year, and that is the purpose of this amendment number 2. If you can go to the next slide. Just to give you a general example, pictures sometimes are worth more than 1,000 words. This is a pretty busy depiction of all the places where you can schedule energy to and from the California ISO. But where that big red arrow is pointing, that is pointing to Tracy, where we actually import your Western-based resource to serve your load. So in essence, we would be bringing energy in at that Tracy location from that big blue circle where Western's resources are, and delivering that to your loads using this transmission right. If you can go back to the next slide, please. Per this contract, we would be acquiring up to 62 megawatts of what are called transmission ownership rights. And basically, that would enable us to deliver up to 62 megawatts of your base resource to your loads using this transmission path. The real benefit of this arrangement is for the amount of Western that we're delivering to your loads over this transmission path, there's a special settlement that applies, and for that portion of your load that's served by that energy that's delivered over that transmission leg, that part of your load is not subject to transmission access fees. So if we're not importing base resource on this right, and you're effectively taking delivery of energy out of the California ISO, you pay around $32 a megawatt hour for every megawatt you deliver to your load. But when we're delivering energy over this right, you are exempt from paying that charge. So we could save quite a bit of money by delivering portions of your base resource to you using this right. Also, there's some other settlement benefits, what's called a perfect hedge, which is a fairly complicated concept, but basically you can save a little bit more money using this right. If we were to execute amendment number 2, as I'll describe further in this presentation, to extend our ability to use this transmission ownership right, we're estimating that we could save in between $2 million up to around $11 million every year as far as transmission costs. And the reason for that differentiation is we save based on the amount of energy we're actually delivering over that right. So if we have a dry hydro year and we're taking less energy from Western because there's less production happening on those facilities, there's still a significant benefit, but in our projections could be as low as $2 million. But in a very aggressive hydro year where we're taking a lot of energy from Western, the savings could be as high as $11 million. So it's actually kind of a pleasure to present this item to you today because it's a really good opportunity to save some money. So it's a good story. So if you can go to the next slide. Other key terms and conditions, as I noted previously, we did execute amendment number 1 to the base resource contract, but as noted, that is set to expire on December 31, 2026. So the primary purpose of amendment number 2 is to enable us to extend that service out through December 31, 2044. One may ask, why is that such a long extension? The reason is because our current base resource contract does have a term that extends out for that duration. So in essence, this would cover the balance of that contract window. That seems like a long time to make a commitment, but there are safe exit strategies in this contract where either WAPA and or we can exit or terminate the agreement upon 60 days notice. So generally it's a little bit of a consideration when we execute a contract of that length, but we can terminate it on short notice if it ultimately was determined that it was no longer useful. As noted here, one of the nuances to note is that we can only use this transmission right with our base resource deliveries as the contract is currently written. we are talking with Western about the possibility of extending that for other uses such as just normal power importing from the Northwest, but that's a key variable. But again, it's expected to generate $12 million on a good hydro year savings just with our base resource deliveries. And I'm just noting that we may come back at some point in the near future here and present a subsequent amendment because this current contract is written based on the current scheduling world we have today. We are working with Western to determine how the introduction of the extended day-ahead market framework, the EDAM, may impact our scheduling in the future. So there might be some fine-tuning that happens in the future. On the next slide, just to note that, again, the savings is generated. This isn't a free right. You know, when we deliver power into the California ISO using this transmission right, we do not pay for ISO-based transmission costs, but we don't get this right for free. We have to pay for it. So the cost of acquiring this right is based on a rate schedule, or basically a rate established by Western. Specifically noted here, it's called PACI T4 revision rate. But in a summary, if for every megawatt hour we deliver over this transmission right, we pay $1.29 per megawatt hour. And again, that helps us avoid over 30 some dollars a megawatt hour. So the difference between that $32 we would otherwise pay versus the cost of acquiring this right at $1.29 can generate some significant savings. If we can go to the next slide, before I present staff's recommendation for your consideration, I'll pause, see if there's any questions. I know this is kind of a complicated topic, but I'll pause there, and then subject to that, I'll present my recommendation to you for consideration.
Any questions, Carrie? Online?
I think, Tim, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much for asking.
Uh-huh.
I strongly support this and applaud staff's efforts in trying to pull this together. What was the reason for Western limiting the use of this to
The argument is that the current base resource contract as written has an obligation whereby that energy has to be sunk to your load, and that this transmission right is explicitly tied to that source. And so in essence, my simple response is Western indicated that it's due to a contractual limitation and that this right is explicitly tied to the production of energy from the CVP generation sources. You know, we have talked conceptually about the use of more effective utilization of this right because we do import power from the Northwest that is not sourced from the CVP generators, and we are in essence buying a transmission right. And so at this point in time, we're still negotiating that with WAPA. They've taken this hard position. We elected to move forward with this amendment because I wanted to capture these savings as soon as possible, but we will continue to engage in further discussions with them about the possibility of extending that right to other sources. But basically the answer is it's due to contractual limitations as interpreted by Western. That's impressive. This is a complicated thing. That's good. Thank you. It's actually an interesting thing because in current scheduling, or not current, but prior to this transmission ownership right, I would try to bring in all of your base resource and those hours that are worth the most money. You know, so there's certain prices are different every single hour of the day, and certain times of the day are more valuable. So we would try to what we call max peak your base resource deliveries, and I would import your power in those hours where you earn the most revenues for that. But actually, with the implementation of this transmission right, it has changed the way we schedule your resources because in many cases, I might be bringing in, let's say, 200 megawatts on a single hour that has the most value, but I can only use this transmission right for up to 62 megawatts of that. So I only save the transmission on the 62 of that 200. But if I actually allocate that 200 megawatts over 4 hours, where I'm bringing in 50, 50, 50, 50, I can use this transmission right during all 4 of those hours and save I can save that $32 on every megawatt hour import throughout the course of that day. And so really our goal is to maximize the economic benefit of those deliveries. So really we've kind of started base loading your Western deliveries to fully utilize this transmission right, because every time I use it up to that 62 megawatts in a particular hour, we save $32. So really, we monitor the value proposition of our imports every single day, and to the extent that we need to change our scheduling behaviors to maximize this value, we will. And so I think this amendment number 2 will just continue the practice we have today, where now we're really bringing a lot of your base resource in more as a base loaded delivery to maximize the use of this transmission ownership right. The other note here is that I appreciate Western's engagement with us, because under the existing amendment we have today, I only have 62 megawatts of rights. But again, as I noted on the first slide, WAPA has 200 megawatts of rights available to its customers. And in some cases, not all customers are using those rights. So I might be scheduling all 62 megawatts of my rights, but another customer in that same hour might not be using their rights. And I could have power that I could bring in on those rights. And so Western amended the program under this amendment number 2, whereby if I have more than 62 megawatts of megawatts to bring in, and another customer is not using those rights at that time, I can actually assume a greater share of that 200 temporarily. So I could schedule up to theoretically 200 to capture that savings benefit. And so that's a really impressive modification WAPA made to this amendment number 2. But in essence, the real goal here is we're just trying to maximize savings for all of you. And this amendment really does support that objective. No, thank you for your support and your question.
Any other questions? Oh, go.
Sure. Yeah, the simple answer is correct. Yeah, you've effectively, through the AAA, delegated authority to the Commission of NCPA to act on your behalf with regards to matters pertaining to the base resource contract. And so that's one of the reasons we require a unanimous vote, because we don't want to take on any additional financial obligations unless the Commission is comfortable with that. But yes, this is the only action that's required to enable us to move forward with this. Yeah, great question. Great question.
Anyone else, Karen?
I guess hearing no questions, again, staff recommends approval of Commission Resolution 2623 to adopt and approve amendment number 2 to the base resource contract, and authorizing authority to the general manager of NCPA to execute said amendment, including any modifications as may be reviewed and approved by NCPA's general counsel.
Okay, floor is open to a motion and a second to approve. Okay, motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Okay, thank you. Taking a roll call vote. Alameda,
Yes.
Bart,
I'm sorry, I thought Tony said this is for full members.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
you
guess
can
she could
abstain.
if she wants to.
did you want to abstain?
Oh, upset.
Okay, thank you. Biggs,
Yes.
Gridley,
Yes.
Healdsburg,
Yes.
Lodi,
Yes.
Lompoc,
Yes.
Palo Alto,
Yes.
Port of Oakland,
Yes.
Reading.
Abstain.
Okay, Roseville,
Abstain.
Santa Clara,
Abstain.
Shasta Lake is absent. Truckee Donner,
Abstain.
Ukiah,
Yes.
and Plumas.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Information item 21, proposed annual budget review for fiscal year 2027. Monty?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present an overview of NCPA's proposed 2027 budget. As the Chair said, this is an informational item. There is no action is being requested today. I just want to make sure this is working, and it's not. Of course, we tested this out. Okay, good. In your packet, you'll see that today's item is a comprehensive budget overview with many components, and we want to make sure we give it the time it deserves rather than rushing through it. We have a substantial amount of material to cover. Assisting me today, Randy, Jane, and the AGMs who are here to help answer any questions you may have, and really to ensure that we got this right. We encourage you to ask questions, throughout the presentation rather than holding them to the end. And before we begin, we want to spend a minute and thank your staff for their time and their diligence in thoroughly reviewing the budget multiple times, during the committee meetings. They offered valuable feedback, recommendations, and really helping us refine what's before you today. And so with that, I'm going to get started. So the budget that's being proposed, the annual budget summary, $785 million. That's about $102 million increase over the 26 budget, or about 15%. And largely it consists of these items here. Net load cost, about $443 million. Transmission, which is about a quarter of our budget. I'm going to skip over the plants for a second, and then other generation resources, which are really largely your resources that you've turned over to NCPA. They could be NCPA contracts or contracts purchased through the MPP, Western, even your GHG obligations. When you add these three up, that's 87% of the budget is really the cost of serving load for the pool members on a 24/7 basis. The NCPA plants, when you factor that into this generation resources, we're going to talk about at least initially 97% of this budget, which I tend to believe is largely the cost of doing business, a cost of doing business. So with that, we're going to touch on these three initially. This is normally found within your packets, and these are the three items that we're going to touch on. These net load costs, $443 million, the transmission, as well as the plants. And when you look at the subtotal of all of these two categories of generation resources and transmission, you add up the 83 and the 19, that's $102 million. That's largely where the increase of the budget is residing. And so starting with that, and then you'll see that other 6%, which I'm really not going to touch on, which are those member resources that I talked about, Western, et cetera. So let's get into this net load cost, the big number, $443 million. And this is really what I call power supply. This is Tony's group is working with the staff of each one of these departments, members, determining what's the gross load heading into 27. When I see a particular member that is plus or minus 5%, I think it's worth a second look as to what's going on. And there were three this year. Biggs, and talking to Power Management, really just adjusting closer to actuals. One of their largest customers, the rice mill, can have some large fluctuations, so they're just bringing that closer to what is being experienced in the city. Palo Alto, Santa Clara, who's growing at either at or above a 10% clip. Just confirming with them that on Palo Alto's side, the growth is largely increased commercial activity. They also have some enterprise and edge data centers that are driving that demand. And Santa Clara, no surprise here, increased demand driven by their data centers as well as several commercial and industrial projects. So once that gets settled, Power Management will then head in and look at the forward curve. And the forward curve is actually showing something that is relatively flat to what we went into the 26 budget. You heard in Randy's update, the pricing is sort of, unusual, I'd say, at this time of year. Commodity prices, similar to the stock market, tend to take what they call this random walk. And commodities really do that in the short term. There are some things that can frequently influence commodity prices, and such things as supply chain disruptions. We saw that, I think, 3 years ago when that 5-year natural gas average fell below the average, or the storage fell below the average, and we saw a spike in pricing. It could be climate related. Are we heading into a drought? Is this a multiple year drought? or it could be geopolitical events. And despite the conflicts that's happening in Iran, we're actually seeing softer energy prices in today's market today. And that's largely due to gas storage levels being above their average, as well as water storage levels being a little bit higher than the average. And so there's trade-offs we can do as a staff. We have to pick a point in time, determine what that forward curve looks like, and use it to go throughout the budget. And whether we end up being right or wrong, I probably guess we'll end up being wrong, but that's okay. And the reason why it's okay is that we true this up monthly. So we'll bill you, and then the following month we'll look into see what actually occurred. If energy prices were softer than this, then there's a refund. If they came in higher, we're going to be asking for additional collection. So we're comfortable with the number that we're proposing in this budget, despite all this noise that's happening around us right now. So once you've determined this, it's really just simple math. Going across your expected load, 443 million, what it comes out to, serving your customers 24/7 load. And so that essentially hits 56% of the budget right out of the gate, is just the cost of serving load. The next item, transmission, which is again about a quarter of our budget, it's up approximately 11%, 19 million, with the wheeling access charge at 17 million. This is an item, as Randy mentioned, we had a UD retreat earlier this month, where affordability was one of the topics that we spent some time on discussing, and transmission was one of those items within the affordability discussion. And I've asked Tony if he would share a little bit as to what's driving the cost, as well as what are we doing about it. And so with that, Tony, if you don't mind, take this next couple slides.
Yeah, no, great, Monty. Yeah, we know that transmission costs represents a significant portion of your budget, so we thought it'd be helpful to talk a little bit about it, because this is an area that continues to just go up and up and up and up. And so we just wanted to kind of highlight what are some of the key drivers out there that are contributing to that continuous increase, but also speak a little bit about what are we trying to do to help mitigate that. There's a number of factors that are driving the increase in transmission costs, but the primary drivers are, one, the interconnection of new generation. And in this picture here, it reflects what's called a base and sensitivity portfolio composition produced by the CPUC. In essence, what it does is it shows what the PUC thinks needs to be built and interconnected between now and 2045 to achieve our carbon neutral objective. And so while we won't go into the details, they're projecting that over an additional 50,000 megawatts of capacity needs to be built and interconnected. In order to interconnect those new resources to the transmission system, we have to build more transmission. So that contributes to the increased cost. Also, interconnection of new loads. There's, for the first time in many years, we're actually seeing some real load growth within the systems. But as has been discussed recently, we're also expecting some fairly large incremental loads in the form of data centers or otherwise to interconnect to the system. And in many cases, those large loads can be as big as individual cities. And so to enable those large loads to interconnect to the transmission system, again, additional transmission will likely need to be built to enable that to occur. And also, our system is aging. You know, the infrastructure has been in place for quite some time, so there's a lot of activity related to just simple upgrades for reliability and also mitigating risk associated with wildfire. There's a lot of wildfire hardening happening out there where there's additional investment being made in the transmission system. So also the objective of maintaining system reliability is resulting in a lot of new transmission being built. If you go to the next slide, just to give you a sense of the magnitude based on, if you go back one, looking at the California ISOs.
Tony?
Oh yeah, please.
Sorry, I had my hand up.
Oh,
I was
sorry.
hoping to ask a question about
Thank
the
you.
previous slide.
Yeah, if we go back. Yes.
Yes, that one. So, I mean, generally speaking, new load and new generation would hopefully potentially lower the per megawatt hour cost. So are we just in the issue of it hasn't come online yet, but we're building it, so we're all bearing those costs? Do you expect a lowering of the transmission access charge in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I've heard that is kind of the PG&E strategy to address affordability, basically saying we're going to put a lot more load on the system to more fully utilize a transmission system, which at some point could be true. But up to this point in time, I would say the primary driver for a lot of the new investment is what they refer to as policy-based transmission projects, or in essence, building new transmission, allow additional generation to interconnect. So there's been a lot of new solar installations down in Southern California and billions of dollars of upgrades that have been built to enable that generation to connect. So, as additional load comes onto the system, presumably that could help create additional consumption or increase the denominator, so your per unit rate would come down. But really where we are in the kind of development sequence, a lot of the investment has been either in interconnecting new generation or system reliability enforcements, wildfire hardening and things of that nature. So the loads are increasing, but we haven't yet seen a lot of those significant new loads that are being contemplated actually interconnecting the system yet at scale.
Yeah, I'll also add that because of some of the uncertainty as to, are we going to decommission Diablo Canyon? Are we going to decommission the 3 large coastal power plants that we're keeping together with duct tape right now for availability and resource adequacy? So we're not building sufficient capacity yet to replace all those that are proposed to be shut down. And until we get some certainty as to what's going to happen there, I don't know that you're going to see a lot of price relief, even with some of the new assets coming online. It's certainly going to change the dynamics of how the market's going to work, as well as, the Western or the row that's being developed for the broader EDAM market in the West. I think we're going to see some other big changes. But right now, we need to tie down some of these potential closures that are planned, and determine, is that actually going to happen? Is it not? We're going to extend Diablo for another 10 years or not? What's going to happen? And as soon as we get that, I think you might see some changing in some of the pricing.
Okay, thank you.
Palo Alto, did you have a question?
Yes, I just have a question. Are these, like the open session parts of these meetings, are these going to be recorded for folks to watch later?
Yes, they are being recorded.
Okay, and how do we access those recordings? Where are they located?
On YouTube.
I believe they're on some kind of a YouTube link. I would have to talk to our facilities manager.
Yeah, they are on a YouTube, and you can get to them by going to our internal website, right?
Yeah, and we can share the
NCPA
link.
Connect. We have them there on NCPA Connect, and then you might be able to get them from the external too.
Okay, I'll browse around and I might ping you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can help get you right to the right place, Lena. Great, thanks. If you go, thank you for the questions. If you go to the next slide, just to give you a sense of scale, based on the current transmission planning efforts, again, this is a dynamic environment. There's a lot of changes that occur based on technical reasons and policy reasons. So each year the ISO is producing updated projections of all of these investments, but based on some recent information shared by the California ISO, in order for us to develop the transmission system to enable us to integrate resources to achieve our 2045 carbon neutral objectives, that will be approximately an investment of approximately 45 to 63 billion over the course of that period of time. So again, a lot of upward cost pressure on the transmission rates. This isn't meant to be a bad news story, but just kind of highlight what we're expecting. But really, one of the things we wanted to focus on the next slide is, what are we really trying to do about this? And so, as Jane noted, and as approved by this commission, NCPA did establish a program a year or so ago through which we are actively engaged in a variety of different forums and proceedings with the goal of really trying to mitigate these increases. And one example of that is when PG&E establishes their what's called their transmission revenue requirement, or determining how much money they need to collect to pay for this transmission system. They have to file that with FERC, and then FERC reviews that request, and then out of that formal process is the transmission rate. The transmission rate is set that you all pay, and there is an opportunity for stakeholders like NCPA to engage at FERC to validate whether or not what's being proposed by PG&E is in fact just and reasonable or justified. And so as part of the program that we did establish a year or so ago, NCPA staff with a lot of effort, including Jane Lecard and Anish Nan and my group, they do participate in those rate proceedings back at FERC. And for example, the most recent rate proceeding filed by PG&E is known as TO21. It's a formula rate proceeding. But as a result of our direct engagement and advocacy, again, questioning whether or not the projects that PG&E is proposing to build are justified, or in fact addressing other financial considerations, whether the rate of return that they're proposing to receive on their investments is justified, or whether they're depreciating their expenses correctly. But there's a lot of detail, and in fact we work with a team of dedicated, I would say, forensic accountants to kind of dig through all this information. But it really does provide real benefits and speak to that objective of trying to hold the line and maintain affordability for our rate customers. So coming out of that TO21 rate case process, the ultimate settlement that was filed, I would argue as a direct result of NCPA's engagement, resulted in an annual savings for all of you of approximately $12.3 million. And how that's realized is, for example, PG&E says, I need $5, and then we advocate that $5 is not appropriate, and when it's all said and done, FERC says, no, it should only be $4.50. And so that is the lower rate that's charged to you, and so in essence generates explicit savings. So again, that's one example of where we're trying to be very active and producing kind of meaningful savings for your customers. In addition to that $12.3 million per year, there was an additional $2.7 million savings that came out of that. The cost of engaging that proceeding was about $445,000, so it did produce a real return on that investment of your funds, and so really wanted to highlight that. But there's other examples on this slide. Participating in San Diego's formula rates, we're saving approximately $2 million, and then as Jane noted, we got a big positive outcome came out of the Supreme Court, where again the Supreme Court denied the current 3 PTOs, being PG&E, Edison, and San Diego, for collecting what's called the 50 basis points adder. So when they set their rate of return, so what is their return on their investment? Historically, they've been able to add an additional 50 basis points. So I'm making up a number where, let's say, their standard rate of return would be 9%. Based on that prior rule, they could actually recover 9.5%, and so that cost, then it shows up in your transmission rate. And through that activity, it was determined that them adding that 50 basis point was in effect not legal, and they have to remove that. So that again reduces the transmission rate that you pay, and we're estimating that the result of that proceeding is a savings around 80 to 85 million for the California ratepayers, and you are about 2 to 5% of that. So you can do the math and figure out what your savings are. So just want to know, we are actively working to try to mitigate these cost increases, but for better or worse, there is a reality that they will likely continue to be part of our budget. Thank you.
All right, so before we transition into the plants, any additional questions on the transmission?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
County, do we have and do we have projections for what they're going to be over the next 5 or so years?
Yeah, we can definitely share that information with you. And in fact, a lot of the assumptions made in this budget are based on that projection. So we can work to provide that information to you in a graphical format so you can see how those rates have trended both historically and how we're expecting them to trend going into the future. So you can at least be aware of that for planning purposes. Happy to share that information with you. And I'll talk with Monty about a way of getting that out to you as part of this.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move now into, I might need you to click that for me. There we go. Into the plants. Before I get into the details, I sort of want to lay out the structure as part of the conversation as we go through the plant. So for these purposes, because your staff has already been in the weeds reviewing this with us, I've rolled these up into these high-level views for the purposes of this meeting. So you'll see throughout the projects, the O&M and other costs. You'll see labor, and I want to just set the tone for labor. So as we went in to make budget assumptions for labor, just as a reminder, the unions for this budget, it's a half a year of their second negotiated raise, which was 4.25%, and then a second half of the one that is really effective 1/1 of 2027. So they're both half-year impacts of 4%. On the unrepresented side, and this was again discussed and approved by the commission when we went into the budget directions. For the unrepresented, we looked at an average inflationary adjustment of 3%. And again, these are assumptions, these are not guarantees. An inflationary adjustment of 3%, and then a merit increase, which, as I called out during budget directions, the big three, they had a range of 0 to 5%, and we picked 2%. And so adding those two together, it was an assumption of 5% for the unrep to include a combination of merit and any sort of promotional adjustments. And labor also includes benefits, which PERS continues to be the largest item, followed by the medical cost. And so in a nutshell, when we go through there, we should be seeing a range of labor anywhere from a floor of 3% to a high of probably around 7-8%, but a blended average closer to the 5% range. You'll see projects on here. I'm going to go through the projects, but really just touch on the big ticket ones just for the essence of time. You're more than welcome to ask if there's a particular project you want additional information on. And then we'll go through the expected generation as well as the revenues associated with that to get to this net cost. So starting with hydro, O&M cost is up about 442. That's largely A&G, which is what I call the general fund side of the house, even though we don't have a general fund. It's the administrative and executive services that gets allocated based on our allocation method that was approved. That is up. It will come down slightly. It's up 180,000 for hydro. It will come down slightly as additional changes have been made since this was put together. There is a slight increase with debt service just based on the debt service schedule that's already been identified. And then there's about 160,000 of some increases due to fixed costs, which is really our reservoir dam maintenance and some mandatory costs really on the royalty payments associated here. And then there's a slight reduction on CalISO charges. Looking at labor, again, you'll see that it's up about 5.5%. That's about where I'd expect it to be in a range. Projects in reserve funding, 16 million. I'll get into that. It is slightly down, largely because fiscal 26 is when we completed the funding for McKay's. We're anticipating approximately an average hydro year heading into 27, so 490,000 megawatt hours. It's a slight increase from over the 26 budget. Average market price, that has been softened, but obviously modeled to try to maximize peak revenue for this unit of $71, generating about $38.5 million in revenues and a net cost to the participants just under $16 million. And so with that, on these projects, like I said, I'm just going to touch on a few here. So the CV runner replacement, $1.6 million. You may recall back in August of 2025, staff took a resolution 25-98 to start this project. It was a 30% down payment. And within the resolution, it said we'd come back in the 27 budget and request the balance. That was approved. So these are scheduled to be paid and delivered around March of 2027. This Part 12 study, that's the term they use. It's really the independent engineering consultant for the dam safety reviews that occurs over periodic points of time. I believe it's Lake Alpine that is scheduled this year in January of 2027. And then you'll sort of notice a couple sprinkles of the Murphy's headquarters, which is the security fence, shop enclosure, and a little bit down it says office maintenance. We're doing some work to improve the security of this property. And then there's one other project that we wanted to call out and talk about, which is about not quite halfway down, the sediment sluicing and removal plan. And Mike, would you mind sharing a little bit regarding this project?
Yeah, so this is one I wanted to highlight just because it's one of the more creative ideas that we've got going as projects. Most of them are pretty routine. Sluicing is a process whereby you open up some low gates and you bring the water levels in the reservoirs down really low. And the water that comes rushing out scours the dirt that you have backed up behind it and pulls it through and sends it on the downstream side of the dam. It's something that we've not had as a tool available to us. It's something that would have been really nice to have as a tool if we had it. Maybe when that landslide first came in, maybe we could have started removing some of the dirt levels that way. At this point in time, because of the levels that we have, we're going to have to just remove that dirt right off the get-go and get it to a point where we can do sluicing. We expect a lot of challenges on this one when we go in for the permitting. And that's where I talked to Jane a little bit. I'm expecting there'll probably be some advocacy efforts to help drive that permit home when we start looking for it. But the whole idea behind it is that we'll have some sort of an annual maintenance process whereby we can bring levels down and remove dirt and try and keep the levels manageable and try and prevent any large soil sediment removal processes in the future. It won't help us necessarily if we get a big massive landslide come in that overfills us, but the goal is to try. And so it was a great idea. It's something that we're looking forward to working on. We're developing the environmental documents now. It really is potentially an environmental benefit. When we have the dam and we block all those soils, what ends up happening is your riverbeds get scoured of the soils and leaves behind the rocky stuff, and that's not necessarily great for some of the critters that want to live downstream. So we're really going to be trying to sell this and market it as it's really beneficial to the environment when we roll through it. Any questions on that project?
This is Suds. Yeah, I think naturally before we had dams, we had a lot of the sediment going down, and I would think that there would probably be very little environmental pushback on this, but that means that we have to get the levels really low. That means, is that normal? Do we usually get to those levels?
For this would be for this would be for McKay's, because McKay's we could draw it down pretty rapidly and fill it back up pretty rapidly. That's not really a storage reservoir. McKay's is really used to maintain the elevation for the maximum power that we have. So yeah, for McKay's we could swing that around as much as we need to get those flows going to clear out behind it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Pauline, did you have a question?
My question was, are there other places that they're doing this sediment sluicing now?
I don't have any information on the others that may or may not be doing it. Yeah.
I just have a quick question here. When do you think you'll be, like, the expense of getting the permit?
Yeah, should we?
When you'll be ready to actually do this, and then the volume that'll be restored?
Yeah, so this will be it'll be a maintenance activity once we get going. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is clear the dirt and sediment that's out there now, because part of the problem is that what we've got in there now is full of a lot of trees and debris that we can't send through the sluiceways. The sluiceways already exist. The facility is equipped with them. So it's not a new feature we need to add to the dam. We just need a new authorization to be able to use what we have featured there, and we've just not been able to do that since the start. But we are expecting to get our modeling and documents done this year, and we're looking to go into the permitting process next year.
So I'll just add that the sluicing is a preferred practice from a number of hydro facilities, but the Forest Service hasn't been very good at approving them and has kind of moved away from them. So it's been part of our recent comments with the Forest Service is that this needs to be reconsidered and brought back because a number of other federal agencies, including the Army Corps of Engineers, has identified it as a preferred method. So it's just getting the right permit and getting the conditions under which you're able to do it. So I think it's a very important step for the agency to try to get this new permit.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving unless there's more questions on this project. So rounding out Hydro's projects, there are 2 vehicles as part of their routine replacement, fairly old vehicles. There is a buoy boat being requested. There are certain tasks that they do on the water that the current boat they have can't be done safely due to the weight issues. So they're requesting to get a new boat with a crane. This is largely the reason for the decrease in the projects. The capital development reserve funding is 12 million. It was higher last year, and that's because our McKay's funding has been completed with this current budget that we're in. And then of the capital development reserve, this is the estimated expenses that is being targeted, about 1.3 million for McKay's and another 12 million for various water studies. It does leave an approximate amount of about a little over 64 million at the end of the 27 budget. And one thing I want to just touch on is McKay's. We've been collecting for that for such a long time, and I just have another slide on that if Mike wants to share a brief update as to where we're at.
Yeah, so the big,
Oh yes, go ahead, Suds.
Yeah, I'm curious about the 12 million for water studies. That's not for like relicensing or anything. What is that for?
This is Jane. It could be used for such activities as you mentioned, but it is not labeled as such for, is anybody on? Is anybody online who we
It's
don't
been
know?
recorded.
It's being recorded. So, okay, so it is a water study fund that could be used for a variety of purposes. And we think we need to have that and maintain it just because of all of the pressure that's on the hydro system. I know that's not satisfactory, but more to come.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
so on the reservoir clean out, we've done with our collections. We have soil levels that have accumulated to the point where we're a little bit concerned about them now. So it's time to start taking action. And over the past, it's always been where do we put the sediment, and we've always had a big push with trying to get it back onto the federal land from whence it came, and they don't want to accept it back. There's been a lot of advocacy efforts trying to get them to accept it, and they just keep refusing, unable to maintain that attempt anymore due to the desire to start getting rid of this material. We had a couple of different options that became available. One was some CCWD property, and the other was a property by a local resident. And so we began the process of negotiating with both. The CCWD process is, as all things with CCWD, challenged to negotiate. While the property would be good and it would have been basically free to use it, they started going down this path of all the costs they wanted to charge us for, which I guess would have been fine, but ultimately we couldn't get anywhere on any sort of an agreement to get that one done. In addition, because of the location of that property, the cost that we estimate would have been about equivalent to what our process is right now, which is the local property from a private landowner. That deal is pretty much done. It's working its way through for signature. And so we do have the environmental processes started where we're now evaluating that property and everything that needs to be done to remove the soil. So once we have all of those environmental processes done, we will be ready to start bidding out that work and get it done.
Any questions on McKay's? All right. Or hydro. All right, we're going to keep moving through these. We're going to head into Geo. Again, similar format on the O&M and other costs. You'll see it's up 1.3 million. A lot of this is related to A&G. That about 900,000 of that increase is that we should see that number come down before the final budget is presented. There is additional 300,000 here for fixed O&M, and it's largely just plant maintenance that's been overdue that they've put into the budget, and then an additional 140,000 on the variable O&M, which is due to the purchased water that's anticipated. Labor is at 4%, which is in the range that we'd expect to see. Projects, this is the big one that's up here, and I got a slide to go into great detail with the amount that's being requested of 14 million. When we look at the net annual generation, about 720,000 megawatts, at an average market price of $54, generating revenues of almost 40 million, net cost to the participants a little over 12 million. So we're going to now head into and look at the projects that make up this 14 million. Again, there's a couple big ones up at the top here. This is the Stretford Plant 1 and 2 maintenance. It's highly corroded, and it's needing some serious work to be done to it. And then you'll see a Plant 1. There's a go ahead, Mike.
I just want to add on the Stretford maintenance. We've actually got, if you look out in the projects and in the presentations we've done, we've got 3 years worth of Stretford maintenance on each one of those 2 Stretfords identified, and it's all pretty expensive stuff to do the maintenance. This year, what we've tried to do is distill it down into the stuff that is absolutely critical. It's stuff that Energy Commission is looking at, and we've identified jointly as needing the most attention. And the other work will show up in the future. They weren't quite as dire, and we'll continue to maintain those. I just wanted to make sure you know that when you look at the Stretford maintenance cost right there, which is $3 million for both Stretfords right now, that does expand out into 2 more years. I think it works out to, is it 10 million each, I think, is what it is over the 3 years.
The third project you see there, Plant 1, this 480 volt MCC, this motor control center replacement. This is a multi-year project where they plan to order a new one for Plant 1. And then on the capital projects down at the bottom, again, it's a continuation of building out the EV charging as well as the fleet and just routine vehicle replacement. Now on the larger side of the request is this maintenance reserve. And I just want to spend a little bit of time on this one. You'll see the annual funding requirement, which is 5.9 million, and then this project, Sprite Well Program. And I have a note there that it's PGC eligible. Just give me a minute to come back to that. And when we first went into this budget, we were initially requesting 6 million to do this Sprite Well Program project. And then in discussions, with the project, with your staff, what was recommended was to request 2 million in cash funding, and let's use approximately 4 million out of the decommissioning reserve. This is an R&D project. If it pencils out, there is an opportunity to extend the life of this, and so using the decommissioning seemed like a reasonable alternative for this initial phase. And so there's a request to transfer 4 million from the decommissioning reserve into the maintenance reserve, leaving an ending balance there of approximately 9.8 million. And then on the decommissioning reserve, there's 37 million that's expected to be in there at the end of this year. If we transfer 4 million out, that's going to drop the balance to 33. Just a few notes on the decommissioning reserve. As I mentioned, this is an R&D project. If it fails, and let's just give it, say, 5 years, these were the assumptions I made. What is it going to cost to pay it back into the decommissioning? And it's very minimal. If the expected return in this fund is just 0.25% higher, there's no additional funding that's needed to recover that 4 million that's pulled out. If we maintain a 3% long-term average return, starting in year 32 through the estimation that we assumed originally going through to 2058, it would be about a $250,000 incremental increase to the decommissioning collections. Today it's at 1.5 million. It may jump to 1.7. It seems like a very minimal request to try to keep the cost relatively lower than asking for a full cash infusion. Now, going back to the Sprite well program, as we discussed this with UDs, the first thing the UD said is, hey, this could be, as I call it, the public goods charge, or what's commonly referred to as the public benefits charge. Is it eligible? And as many of you know, with that PGC charge, I think it's 2.85% of your sales revenue is required to be set aside for four things. Low-income programs, energy efficiency, really in the form of rebates, education, and R&D. And so the UDs were really keen to this, that using this $2 million in cash as part of their choice of allocating their public benefit funds as part of the contribution towards this R&D project. And the Sprite, as I've worded it down there, and I'm going to have a slide on this and let Mike talk about this, because this is something we may have talked about it before, I'm not sure, but I just want to make sure that you're well versed into what's being requested for this.
Okay, so the project, what we've got in this project is the idea of injecting water shallow instead of deep. I kind of got the concept from operating boilers at the CT project, right? When you want to have an efficient boiler operation, you inject your coldest water farthest away from the heat source, and as that water moves closer to the heat source, it boils and then becomes superheated. And I wanted to apply that principle to the reservoir, and when we modeled it, we found that just like an HRSG, it works a lot more efficiently that way. So the idea is we will inject the water at the top of the reservoir, allow it to fall down to the lower depths of the reservoir where it will gain heat, and that will allow the heat to then rise up deeper into the reservoir and allow the steam production to become more efficient. The model came back and said 10 to 15 megawatts gain is what we're expecting. Not only are we looking to keep it shallow, but we're looking to distribute it further around the field. Right now we have it going into a few precise locations, and when you inject too much, you saturate out some of your wells and you lose power. Some of the wells we have are actually deeper than our steam wells, so we're really injecting it in the hottest spots and messing up the efficiency. So the current plan is we're going to work over 9 wells. There's some of the wells are just idle wells right now. They're not being used, so those are prime candidates because right now they're doing nothing for us. And so that'll be a great opportunity to convert one of those to test and prove the theory behind this. A couple of the wells are currently injection wells, and we'll just modify those when the time comes to be shallow instead of deep. And then 2 of the wells we're going to retain as is. Those are the horizontal injection wells. Those are suitable for our purposes, so we'll keep those going and not change those at all. And then finally, there'll be 2 new wells added to round this out. So the cash flow for what that looks like is at the table there down below on the bottom. And so what you see is in 2027, we start out with a $5.2 million well, and then we don't do anything in 2028. That's for our evaluation period to see if we could prove that what we have done is working, and does then make the determination as to continue on to the next well in 2029. So this is a long project. It's drawn out over a number of years. Therefore, the benefits are long. We're showing a 13-year payback. We ramp up the megawatts as the wells ramp up. In there, we've got a pricing on there. We used an average of $56 a megawatt hour over 30 years, so it really doesn't change much over the years. And so it's a pretty conservative power price that we'll get out of that. We did a couple of different ways. This particular table here shows the benefits being collected at a resource adequacy value starting at $15 a kilowatt month and ramping up at an escalation rate, since resource adequacy really is a reflection of cost to construct facilities, and those facilities will increase. And we started with RECs at $22 and escalated those as well. So it has a pretty positive value in that regard, if I were to go even more conservative and not escalate the RA or the REX and just hold those flat for the life of the project, it still gives us positive returns. So it really looks to be a good project. And so it'll be really fun to get this one going and prove out the results and then keep adding to it and see those benefits come back into the project.
And I'll just say that, as Mike said, it's very exciting. The opportunity looks really good. And the other benefits that have aligned really well with moving forward on this project is the team up there with Mike have recently completed the 30-year extension on the lease of the property from the Bureau of Land Management. They've also just completed, and you've approved, the water agreements to give us the rights to water for years to come. So everything's really aligned well to see now, can we extract additional resources out of this field and take advantage of the field a little differently using technology that we haven't taken advantage of in the past. So it's also scalable. I think, as Mike pointed out, while it's laid out over a longer period of time, it could be accelerated a little bit depending on the results that come out.
This is Cindy. I have a quick question. Can we go back one slide, please? So 2 million is eligible for our public benefits or public goods charge, right? Is that all for, oh, that is fiscal year 27. So I can assume my percentage of that is my percentage of the plant. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Any additional questions? I just want to make, go ahead. I think Basil, it was really just to minimize that uplift right there from one year to the next.
The other concept was to ramp up into it because what we were looking to do is put this into a reserve fund similar to the maintenance reserves. And so even though the following year we're not doing anything, we're going to still continue a collection, because what that does is gives you a nice stable, flat, or at least slowly ramping cost up. So the next year's payment would be higher than that, and then until we ramp up into the full payment that's needed to complete this project, and then you would have a predictable cash flow stream as to what this would cost over the years, and not have to try and manage that in your rates. Sure.
Any other hands? Okay. Next up is our heading into the gas plants. Let's see here. All right. I want to start at the bottom on the gas plants, since these just don't run as frequently as the prior two projects. First off, looking at what's forecasted for annual generation, about half of what we estimated going into the 26 budget, aligning it closer to what I think our power management expectations are. When forecasted generation is this low, fuel is the main source, the main driver of cost in the O&M and other cost line. And that's the incremental sort of decrease you see here is associated with fuel just due to the runtime. Labor is at about 3%, which is what we'd expect to see. Projects relatively flat from the prior year, and we'll talk about those. With the annual generation at about a $218 estimated market price, it's generating $965,000 in revenues, and a net cost to the participants just a hair over $7 million. One of the things I just want to point out, if you look at that right in the middle where it says annual budget cost 25, it was 5.4 million, and then all of a sudden it looks like it just arbitrarily ballooned, which it did, to 8.6 and then 8 million this year. That big increase was at a request of the project participants to add collections for decommissioning for this project, which is around 1.8 million. That started in the 26 budget and has now is going to carry on through 2044. So I just want that noted. It was for no other reason than, for the most part, adding decommissioning into this project. All right, looking at projects, there's a few projects listed here. Up at the top, O&M, again, another one of those MCC upgrades. It's a multi-year project starting in 27 to go out into 28 and 29. These breakers are original, and the parts are essentially obsolete. You'll see Roseville parts refurbishment. This is the continued effort to buy the parts from Roseville Electric, and as they decommission their turbine, and we'll move those parts into inventory. I'm going to skip over this capital projects for a second and talk about the maintenance reserve funding. Again, this is relatively, I'm not calling it flat, but it has an inflationary adjustment as Mike and Raf have planned for this in years past, not to just have these large swings, but more of a incremental levelized contributions. And then of the maintenance reserve collections, this is where you see the typical outage work, the balance of plant, as well as some identified work on the CT Alameda 2, as well as CT Lodi, leaving an estimated reserve balance of just under 4.2 million. If I jump back to the capital projects, you'll notice that there's a very interesting project here that, again, I want Mike to share with you, this Lodi fuel gas bypass line project that's being requested.
Yeah, so you talk to any plant operator, one of the things that they'll tell you they really hate, the piece of equipment they just don't want, is gas compressors. Those are always a source of headaches. They're high maintenance, high unreliability, and ours have been just that. While we've done a lot of things to improve the reliability over the years, it's still a device that you don't want, and they're a big electrical load. And so through discussions with PG&E, we learned that they've made adjustments to the pressure on their systems in Lodi over there, and we are able to take advantage of those pressure increases that they have done. And they are now operating their system at a level that would allow us to operate without a gas compressor on that particular unit. So that'll save about 500 kilowatts of electric load. It'll save a lot of maintenance. We'll still keep the compressor there and keep them ready in case the pressure falls off. But if we make a bypass around it, it will get us a little extra power out. We're expecting an overall savings of about $42,000 a year on this one. And we expect improved reliability as a result, because the gas compressor still remains one of our high failed start mode pieces of equipment. Any questions on what we're doing there? It's a pretty exciting project.
Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move into CT2. This one should be quick. The repower for CT2 is still in progress, and really what this budget reflects is the minimum maintenance that's required to maintain the system during our as we're working through the repower phase. So there's no expected run. It's in an outage at the moment. So the net cost to the participants, this is currently Alameda, Lodi, Lompoc, and Roseville. It's about 2.4 million. That group, along with NCPA, is currently working on a termination agreement. We've had several meetings on this to date. We're hoping that we can wrap up this negotiation and the termination of what I'll call the CT2 old as we transition into the CT2 repower. If we're able to get that done, just noted here, prior to June 30th, then the owners, Lodi, Lompoc, and Roseville, that's moving into the repower, will pick up their new estimated share of this cost here. I just want to make sure that's noted. If that termination agreement lags into the fiscal year, it's going to get a little messy for my accounting department, but we'll figure out how to get it done. But I think we'll get it completed before we get to the end of June. Any questions on CT2? Okay, I'm going to move into LEC. Sort of the same concept here, looking down at the bottom first. Annual generation, it's down slightly, relatively flat to 26, so about 908,000 megawatt hours. But what's happening here, and you heard Randy mention this in his report, We are seeing and experiencing softer gas prices, and when that occurs, it's certainly beneficial to lock up contracts when the gas is really at these not quite historical lows, but they're darn depressed. And so due to that and GHG costs being lower, the O&M and other costs, that's the main driver of that line being down about 5.4 million is gas and lower costs in fuel and GHG costs. Labor, you'll see at 3.65% is in that range. Projects, it's up slightly, and we'll talk about that. So an annual cost, the estimated market price of around $74, generating just under 80 million in revenues, netting a cost to the participants of approximately just under 42 million. And so looking at the projects, there are these two up at the top. Well, first starting with the top one, the cooling tower refill. This is a project that's probably done about every 8 to 10 years with this plant. The current tower fill is starting to sag and shrink and break apart, so this is the project to replace it. You'll have the annual maintenance outage, which is estimated at 1.2 million. And then there's just some other sort of painting and preservation, as well as these HRSG penetration seals that are deteriorated and they're bypassing heat. And they'll replace these seals during that maintenance outage that I think is scheduled in the April-May timeframe of 2027. Any questions here on these projects? Okay, moving into the capital side, the FX turbine upgrade. This is the final, the 3 of 3 payment or collections for this project that will kick off shortly thereafter. And then they do have this this DCS, this distributed control system. Is that what it is? That's what I thought. Hardware update, again, a sizable project that's being done during the outage. Maintenance reserve funding, again, relatively flat to the prior year with a slight, inflationary adjustment, a little under 3 million. And then of that amount, there's quite a bit of work for the that's using of the collections we have to date with some plant projects, so overhaul, and just various other items within the plant, the HRSG generator, steam turbine, leaving an ending balance of just over $1 million. And so before I transition from LEC, any questions for Mike? Okay, that rounds out 97% of the budget. So bear with me, we just got a little bit further to go. Heading into the next sort of final phase of discussion, it will be L&R and power management that we'll talk about. There is another section here that's within our budget that I call miscellaneous. It's judicial action, energy risk management, and settlements. It's literally way less than 1% of the budget. I'm not going to spend any time on that. Those are pretty straightforward. But I do think it's important to talk about L&R, which is our sort of bread and butter of activities, legislative and regulatory. These are their priorities. Continue to represent and advocate on our interests through a lot of the grassroots advocacy that you see listed here, whether it's strategic issues, the legislative rally, the federal policy conference, or even legislative tours and briefings. Those are all built into her budget, along with the Western and the customer programs. One of the things that's fairly new, it really half year in the current budget we're in, but a full year next year, is this external communications and crisis communication services, providing these public affairs support, as well as developing and enhancing our social media footprint, which is also including some employee recruitment. And so any other priorities that I may have missed there, Jane, that you'd like to add? Okay. And so similar nature, rolling up Jane's budget into these 4 main categories of legislative, regulatory, Western, and customer programs. Total operating budget being requested 1.8 million. That's 127,000 higher than 26, which matched what she brought through the L&R committee. Labor, again, just under 6%. That's in the range we'd expect to see. And then A&G occupancy costs, their net cost to the participants, 4.8 million. Any questions on L&R? I sort of went through that sort of fast, but very excited for those priorities and heading into the 27 year. We're going to move into power management. And again, I wanted to show this is actually a view screenshot of the control center of the new DRC. It's pretty impressive. It's all built out. I promise we're going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony. Yeah, before Randy retires, and
Yes.
he's going to jump in here. I put this slide in here because the generator, the permanent generator, has been delivered. We are in process of getting that prepped to be installed. It's sort of the final piece that has to be done, but it's done. It's built out. You got to remember the other half of this building has open office space that is available. We have that shared occupancy agreement that has been drafted and signed off by this commission that if you access it, if there is a creative way that you could use it from a staffing standpoint, it's available for use. Just wanted to make sure I mentioned it and had it out there. Looking at Tony's budget, he rolls up a lot of his departments, dispatch, scheduling, pooling, forecasting, power management, portfolio management, industry restructuring under that power management level. And so, of course, red flags. It's like, how the hell did Tony drop his budget, $200,000? That's just not realistic. And it's because there are periodic times where one-time items get added into the budget that can be quite large. In 26, if you recall, there was a SCADA project that was put into the budget. That was a one-time hit in 26. That's removed from 27. And I'll talk about that in just a second. On the labor side, about 5% increase within the range. And then his allocation of A&G and occupancy costs. This will be the first year of he's getting a larger sort of share of occupancy as we have funded the new DRC from a programming standpoint. We need to evaluate what is really the true cost of maintaining that building. So a large portion of it is allocated here, generating about $16.3 million of cost. In regards to that SCADA project, I just want to make sure I spend just a minute talking about this. SCADA is, I think the acronym is Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. This really is what we call the nerve center for monitoring and controlling all the generation and transmission in real time. We've been using surveillance technologies, like many of you use this as well for the last 20 years. And what was told is that they're really maturing closer towards a distribution utility than closer to our role as a generator operator. And so upgrading this, and the reason why I call this out is this project does scare me a little bit because of what it controls. Tony's group is scheduling, and you saw the very first slide, $443 million of this budget is rolling through power management on a daily basis, and we've got to make sure we get this right. And so upgrading this project not only improves safety, reliability, our cybersecurity, but really risk management. How do we have the right system in place to really minimize any sort of risk that could be to not just NCPA, but flowing through to you? And a lot of that can be even associated with wildfire risk that we may anticipate. The IT group or IS group, as well as Tony's dispatch group, has been holding quite a few meetings, workshops, identifying a lot of the stuff that is part of this project. Drafting this RFP is planned for this summer, and you will see a contract put in front of you for approval at some point later this year with a timeline for this project. I just wanted to point it out. It is something you guys commit to, but this project, we've got to make sure it's done right because of the amount of tentacles that our current SCADA system is touching. So in case you have any questions on that, I'm going to transition then to complete power management. Again, this is the service revenue of the work that's being done in power management, and these are the customers contributing to that $3 million. And so it leaves an estimated power management cost just over $13.3 million. So any questions for Tony regarding power management? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to head into the executive and administrative services, which is a lot of the A&G that you saw that was put into all the operating budgets. I broke this down by department. Many of us did what we could to hold the line. or even decrease if possible. But there are a few that stand out. Again, that jump greater than 5%. We went into this trying to hold the line at 3 or less. And so for Jane's group on the legal, she can certainly add a little to what I'm going to say why she's up 141,000. There's a lot of stuff going on. She's going to requesting to shift a lot of the Gen Services contract review to an outside attorney. And then there's several projects that we've talked about that she's going to need to be focusing her time on directly, which is the CT2 repower. Some of those, the FERC relicensing effort that Jake's team is going through now, as well as something she mentioned earlier with the GEO project and trying to find a way to move those assets into a nonprofit sort of LLC structure, as well as the tariffs, which continue to really give the LEC group some pain points. And Jane, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the the thing I'd like to stress is, yes, Monty went over all the additional costs. I think everyone in the agency has been subject to additional processing time, and that doesn't always work for everyone's schedule. So we really want to drop that down to help support, especially Mike's team. But you know, Jane's been subject to it. There hasn't been anybody who's been immune from the workload that's been going through the legal department. And when I looked at this year, I was actually looking at potentially adding another lawyer, which would have been about double that cost or close to it. But when we looked at our existing contracts, we have an amazingly screaming good deal for legal services for another year. And so it seemed like from a financial standpoint, it was beneficial to all of you that I used more extensively outside counsel, at least for the next year, before asking for another position. And so that's what got loaded into the budget. There, you know, there's just a total number of hours in the day. And I know that my assistant is overloaded right now. And I don't know how much more I can do. So I do need to push work out, and that's what this is for. So if anybody has any questions about that, but I think Monty went over the big uplifts, along with all the standard work, and then the legislature never stops messing with the Brown Act, as Monty described earlier. And so as a part of that, there's, you know, endless, you know, upgrades and adjustments we still have to make to all of our processes. So anyone have any questions on the increase in the legal budget?
Okay, looking at human resources is up. She made some reductions in this budget. There is a one-time request for a comp study. Our IBW and HEA contracts end in December of 2027, which is technically the 28 fiscal budget, but we have to start this in the first half of the year, which is in the 27 budget, to get that comp study done before we head into negotiations that summer with the two groups. So that, I think, was a $40,000 uplift. So she was able to minimize some of that increases by making reductions in other areas. Risk management, this is where we budget for the liability insurance. It's 10% increases year over year. The wildfire, to maintain that wildfire coverage, still continues to add pressure to this budget, which is why this one is up. And then facilities is up, largely just, these are really the maintenance, standard maintenance increases that we see through the vendors, whether it's labor, inflationary parts are just doubling in price. And then there's also the cost estimates, as I mentioned earlier, for the DRC that are added here. Labor, again, it's under the cap, but sort of near it at just a click under 8%. So a net cost of about just over 24 million for the admin services group. And then a big component of not just admin. Yep, go ahead, Suds. That's correct. It's it's about, in the unrepresented group, which includes dispatch, it's about 100. And then I have about 70-ish represented at the plants.
This is more than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Suds, this, I think Monty did mention before, this includes all the benefits and the PERS, and we're seeing a pretty significant increase in the PERS contribution.
Okay, so it's due to first. Okay, thank
Well,
you.
it's not all due to PERS, but I just want to highlight that this isn't just labor direct costs. This is the indirect of all the benefit programs, as well as the PERS increases in their contribution requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to go into details. We're almost at the finish line. In Suds, you're correct. This is our staffing. There are no new positions being requested. I will say staff did request, there were 4 positions requested. We have decided to hold those and allow the new general manager to evaluate those before bringing forward a recommendation into whether it's this budget or the next budget. So again, we've held FTEs relatively flat as we've, again, tried to find ways to be very creative, make things more efficient. But again, holding the line the best we can when it comes to staffing. And then, as you may recall, there's this assembly bill that we have to talk about that shows any sort of vacancies and what we're doing about it. And honestly, this commission having as one of the many goals we have when it comes to our attraction and retention of employees, you have made strides and changes in that area. I commend you for it. And as if you look across our bargaining groups, we really have 0 to some degree vacancies, most of them landing in the unrepresented that we're actively recruiting right now. And so overall, and there's the number right there, Suds, 106 on the unrepresented side. Vacancy rate 4.7%. And again, that's largely a testament to you guys for giving us the tools we need in order to attract and retain our employee base. Just sliding into those salaries. This is now the salary side of the house. Again, about 35 million. This is, I think, overall increase of approximately 6%, broken out by unrepresented IBW and HEA. Looking at the benefit side, as Randy mentioned, a large portion of it is on the PERS. This, again, this unfunded liability, we're about halfway through that 15-year amortization payback, but it's still a big portion of that cost. So of the 13 million, approximately 10 of it is the unfunded liability. If and when that day comes that this is paid, you're actually going to see that shift to the right, with medical being the largest of our benefit costs, because the normal cost of our program is closer to 10% or 3 million if we didn't have an unfunded liability. So there could be massive savings in the future once we pay that off. Looking through the balance of them between deferred comp, OPEB, workers' comp, dental, these are all relatively small and flat to the prior year. Combining the two together, again, from what was approved in the 26 budget and approved in this one, it's approximately about a 5.5% increase between the salaries and the benefits. Again, the number that's making up that labor that you saw scattered throughout today's presentation. And if there's no hands, I'm just going to keep going. I think I have 2 slides to go. Gary, move me forward. One more. And so just really this proposed sort of final steps is we have to make some adjustments. There, like I mentioned earlier, there will be some reductions to A&G across the board, and then some other miscellaneous adjustments across the agency. We will have final budget reviews and recommendations at these 3, 2 of the meetings here, facilities and LEC, and we'll present it, the final to the UDs on April 9th. And then the commission approval on April 23rd. And I promise at that meeting, the presentation will be brief. Might just be a couple slides of the changes from today's budget. And with that, that's all I have. if there's any questions for the team.
No questions? Okay, thank you, Monty.
That was a lot, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, at this time, it's time to go into closed session.
Yep.
Jane, will you take us in, please?
Yes, so if everyone who is at a remote location could please put signs on your door and make sure that you only have folks inside whatever room you're in that are allowed to be in closed session. I'm just reviewing here. Okay, so we're gonna. Does anybody on the line need more time? Okay, okay, great. So at this time, at 12:16, the commission is out of closed session, and we have no reportable action from closed session.
Okay, thank you, Jane. And with that, is there any new business? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.